killer tier this time as of patch 5.1.0, aka the Resident Evil mid chapter. Trickster just got its rework. I'm going to be doing up to purple add-ons, except Tombstone Piece. I just won't allow Tombstone Piece, but other than that, every color will be allowed from brown add-ons to purple add-ons, so no iridescence. And I'm just going to go straight into it. I'm going to keep most of them brief, except for the ones that have got any major changes since the last tier list. First is Trapper. Trapper has always been just a shit killer. Uh, he takes way too long to set up. Even when you set up, it can be easily disarmed. If someone saw you place a trap, they can call out to their friends, or they can just go and disarm it, and that trap is useless. Even if they don't see you place it, they can still find it later on while they're not in a chase. If they see a jungle gym and they're working on a gen, they can say, "I'm just going to quickly scout this jungle gym for a trap." And then be like, "Oh shit, there's a trap here," and then they'll disarm it. So when you come over there, they can just loop that jungle gym regularly. So Trapper is really bad. The only thing keeping him from the worst killer in the game right now, in my opinion, is if he gets lucky, he can get a snowball. He actually does sort of get like an indirect buff. His new trap models, which made him significantly darker, so like a metal, like a dark grey color. It means you don't really have to run Tarball anymore. You sort of have a base kit, which is actually pretty solid. You can run like a bag and setting tools, and you can be solid enough. But even then, he still needs like a lot of buffs, like starting walls, traps, and stuff like that. Next is Hillbilly, who I'm going to put in the C tier. Three reasons I'm going to give you. The first reason is his nerf made him his beast kit a fair bit weaker. You just can't saw over to someone. Saw a pallet, go for a curve, and then back rev them. You will overheat before you even do that. And then also, the biggest thing was his add-ons. He just has no good add-ons anymore. And his good add-ons that he did have, like engravings, you can't counteract the negative effects anymore. Like the charge time, and you get even more overheat with the increased charge time. So that's the first thing which makes Hellbilly significantly weaker in my opinion. The next thing is the map reworks have been making it way worse for Hellbilly. Maps are getting way more cluttered, meaning you'll constantly have to cancel your saw and recharge it, making overheat even like the overheat will be even more impactful since you have to keep canceling your saw. And not to mention the loops that they're creating. You're able to curve less and less on loops. You used to be able to curve in a lot of loops, but with every map they rework, there's even less loops you can curve at. And then the last thing is that survivors are just getting better at looping. Hillbilly really is one of the easiest killers to loop. Even if you reverted his nerf, he could probably still use even more of a buff because it's just so easy to loop Hillbilly. He is one of the worst chases in the game, in my opinion. Even if you can curve a loop, like let's say I can just curve this pallet. Well, if a survivor knows I'm going to go for a curve, and then they even get caught by it, they're in a position where I can't curve them. They can just sidestep it because what's stopping them? The hitbox isn't that big. It's not like Blight, and I can only move in a straight line, and I have to commit to a straight line. So if they know I'm about to curve, they can just take a step out, and I'll go right by them, and then that's a 3 second stun, and I can just make distance. So Hellblade just isn't very good, and I'd argue, even if you reverted the nerf, he would probably only be like maybe B tier, top of B tier at the most, but I'm going to keep him at the top of C tier for now. Next is Wraith. We all know that Wraith has become pretty solid after his multitude of buffs that he has received over the years. With his most recent one, the increased movement speed while cloaked, he's pretty damn solid. There are things you could do against him, like splitting in gems works against him, healing up really fast. Stuff like will make it and botany knowledge, or even just a strong med kit really does shit on Wraith. And the fact that Wraith just has low snowball potential, and if he needs a down, let's say I need to commit to a survivor and down them because I just really, really need a hook, Wraith can't really do that because you will be able to get looped for a fairly decent amount of time, and there's not much you can do about that. But other than that, hit and run playstyle works very well against most teams, and you'll only occasionally get beat by just a really coordinated team. Next is Nurse, who is the strongest killer in the game, best chase in the game, a low cooldown in her power so you can snowball very well. Her power also doubles as a mobility tool so you can get around the map faster. You can actually get around very fast because you can just cut through a building. A lot of killers might have to go around the building, but Nurse can just cut straight through it. A lot of the time, which is very underrated in my opinion, is Nurse can just blink and like up high. Like the Mother's Dwelling main building generator. It's incredibly hard. It's almost unpressurable for most killers, but not for Nurse. Nurse you can just blink up to it. You don't have to spend the time going all the way around the back, up the stairs, and then all the way back around it. You can just blink up straight to it. So that's another really good mobility tool she has. But there's not much to say about her. She's the strongest killer, and she always will be. Next is Hag, who is strong but overrated in my opinion. 90% of the teams you're going to beat fairly easily, but that 10% are going to destroy you because if they find out quickly that it's a Hag, they're just going to have one person harass you, set off all your traps, and you'll just get shot on. You won't be able to get down any traps, and if you do, you'll maybe have 3 down at the most, which just isn't enough. You won't be able to chase people, the gens will fly, and you just won't be able to do what Hag does, which is snowball and camp and slug the shit out of people. But if you do get your traps down, you can get pretty damn fast chases. You just let the traps do the work. It's Hag, you place down the traps, and then you just exist, and then you will hit survivors. You start chasing to run into a trap, you'll hit them, you'll replace the trap, they'll run into another one, and then you hit them again. But like I said, coordinated teams shit on Hag, but that's a very small minority of teams, and even then, you might get a lucky snowball or something like that, and you might win. Next is Myers, who's going to be another D tier killer. Myers really just has like power creep, is what I think of when I think of Hillbilly as well, but also especially Myers. Just Myers used to be considered like a top 5 killer, or even like a top 8 killer. It used to be around A tier, but just power creep has hurt this guy so much. The better survivors have gone on looping, the less efficient Myers has become. You spend a lot of time getting out of tier 1, and then once you're in tier 2, you still don't have a power, and then you stalk, waste even more time to get to tier 3, and then you just backgrab someone and hit them at tier 3, and then people avoid you for the rest of the duration because you actually don't have a proper anti-loop power. You have like an increased lunge and stuff like that, but that's not enough to get a survivor at a jungle gym and another jungle gym and hold an W, like, so Myers just needs a huge buff. He's severely outdated, similar to Trapper, so Myers D tier, and he's probably going to be there for a while. Next is Doctor, who I'm going to put in the top of B tier. I think Doctor's quite underrated. His anti-loop is solid. Either you get a virtual instant pallet or you get a hit. There's not really any in between. You either get a very fast pallet, faster than Freddy or Clown will get one, or you get you shock him and get a hit. And sometimes there's nothing the survivor can do. That was a notification, but that was for hurling lead. But yeah, you're not supposed to actually, as Doctor, you're not supposed to chase survivors the way you normally would. You sort of just come up to survivor with your static blast, and then you you sort of follow them, and if they come onto a pallet, you shock them, and then you get the hit, or they can make it around another loop, and then they drop it, or you shock them and get a hit. It's sort of like that, and a lot of the time there's nothing they can do. In some loops, in some cases, they can't pre-drop the pallet, or if they do pre-drop it, you can still get them. Sometimes you can trap them in places in some pallets, but I think Doctor's anti stealth is really underrated. Being able to Doctor saves so much time with that static pass. Being able to find survivors instantly, being able to know where most survivors are at most times is just such a luxury as Doctor. Because I find most of the games I lose as killer are the games where I go to a generator, it's on 60%, and I can't see the survivor, and I can't afford to sit there and look for them, or another gen's going to pop in the distance. Doctor doesn't have that. Because, if I do that, I can static blast and I'll reveal the survivor, you know, or an illusionary doctor will appear and I'll see them over there, or they're -3 and they'll just randomly scream. Always know where they are, and I've got antidote. So I think Doctor's pretty strong. The only thing that sort of counters him is a holding W and pre-dropping battles, but that's sort of basically every killer. Next is Huntress, who's just always been a strong killer, always been a solid killer, and she still is, and she will continue to be. She's really good, especially if you're a good Huntress. Personally, I don't find her that hard to play. I was playing a lot of Huntress over the past 2 months because with the console performance issues, she was one of the killers that didn't lag when you use her power. So I was playing quite a lot of her, and I just sort of picked her up after not playing her a while, and I was doing completely fine. It's really not that hard, especially after playing a lot of Trickster and Deathslinger. That being said, there's a huge skill component in terms of long shots and mid range, like 15, 18, 20 meter shots, which sort of separates the good huntresses from the bad huntresses. And against the good hunters, basically, if the loop favours her, there's nothing the survivor can do. She will get hit, but if the loop doesn't favour her, then there's nothing the huntress can do, and that's where her weaknesses lie, because there is quite a few loops where hunters can't really do anything if the survivor plays right, which can cause her to really slow down in terms of pressure. You could have just a really long chase with the survivor if they've got like a decent setup where you can't hit them with your hatchets. Like a couple of jungle gyms, and high rock loops. She can't really do anything about that. Plus the fact, she's 110, so just splitting generators will do fine, and splitting up, not allowing her to get a snowball, which she can do very easily. And if you want to watch a really good Huntress, go watch Coconut RTS. He, in my opinion, is a very entertaining YouTuber, a streamer, and is also just a really good Huntress in general. Next is Bubba. I'm going to put Bubba at the top of C tier above Hillbilly. C tier might seem a bit low for him because a lot of people tend to put him in the B tier or maybe even the A tier, some people. I just think Leatherface is super susceptible to hold on W, stealth, just pallets and windows in general do slow him down quite a lot. Uh, and I think if people just play well, you should just really struggle as Leatherface. Unfortunately, he just, I have to say he's better than Hillbilly because at least Leatherface can just be within like 8 meters and he'll force you to put down the pallet, which can, lead to just complete dead zones where he'll just get super fast chases from then, which Hillbilly can't do. Hillbilly can break the pallet faster than average, but Leatherface basically gets the pallet down within like 5 or 10 seconds every time, which is boring as shit to play against, but it's the truth. He's also a super good camper, so if you want someone dead, you can easily just stand next to them and they will die because people can't push that hook or they'll die too. Holding W, dropping the pallets, utilizing TL walls and stuff like that, you will be able to loop him for a very long time. He hasn't got any mobility. And like I said, if needs be, you can literally just stealth it out and, he'll be forced to leave because he has no way of tracking you. Next is Freddy Krueger, who I'm going to put at the bottom of C tier. I think Freddy, initially after his rework, was decently strong but overrated. He was just a huge noob stumper because, back in the day when Freddy was reworked, they would run sloppy butcher and shit, and then, Claudette would be self-curling in the corner, which would, just hugely inflate its kill rate. But I think nowadays, Freddy just, after the multitude of nerfs he's got to his base kit and add-ons, I think he's just kind of shit again. Like, he's so easy to counter. If you're awake, you have nothing to worry about, and if you're asleep, you just have to pre-drop the pallet. His gen teleport is limited to generators, meaning, in the chase you could just hold W. His mobility is limited to generators, unlike someone like Blight or Wraith. So he really just falls completely susceptible to the whole meta right now of dropping palace and holding W. So I'm just gonna put him in the seat here. He's not very good and he's not very fun either. Next is Pig, who in my opinion is probably the worst killer in the game right now. Her ambush attack is really shit at loops. Uh, you know, if you can use your ambush attack at a loop, you could probably just mind game it anyway. And even if you do try to use it, like if you crouch down, a goose survivor is just going to immediately run, and then you're going to have to uncrouch. But then that's going to make you lose a bit of distance, which will usually allow the survivor to just get to another pallet anyway, one that you can't use your dash attack at. Her stealth isn't very good. You move at 90% movement speed during it, meaning you're going to be wasting so much time, which means it's better just not to use it most of the time. And then you got her reverse bear traps, which far too often just don't buy you enough time. Multiple times I've faced a pig, I've gotten straight off a hook, searched the jigsaw box in 5 seconds, got my helmet off in like literally 20 seconds after being unhooked, and then got healed up, and then I'm reset, and we're back doing what we usually do, which is do gens. So pig is just inconsistent, and even if her reverse bear traps were consistent, she would still be a shit killer in my opinion. Next is Clown, who I'm just going to put above pig. The reason I'm not putting him below Trapper is because Trapper can get a lucky snowball if his setup works well on the right map, but Clown on the other hand can't really do that. His chase is not terrible, it's alright, but he can't get a snowball, he has no mobility, he's got no slowdown, he's got no stealth, he's got no anti-stealth, he just really doesn't have anything going for him other than his mediocre chase, so yeah, Clown's D tier. He will probably always be D tier because his rework didn't really do much for him. Next is Spirit, who in my opinion is the only other S tier killer, spoiler alert, but yeah, she's the only other S tier killer in my opinion. She's basically just Nurse but slightly worse. I think when Elstarva put her over Nurse, I think was just wrong, because Nurse has a faster chase. She's less punished, missing a phase is much more punishing than missing a blink. She also has better snowball. Nurse is better snowball and Spirit. Because Nurse has the faster cooldown and Nurse has more mobility. But being a slightly worse Nurse is still really good. She's still got one of the best chases in the game, either second or third. And she's still got good mobility. It's not great, but it's better than the average killer. And she's got little counterplay from the survivors. Not no counterplay, but she's got little counterplay. which just makes her super strong. So Spirit, second best killer, but maybe not for long because I sense something coming up for her soon. Next is Legion, who I'm going to put as the second worst killer. I usually put Legion up around where Myers is, you know, or just above Myers. But the more I play Legion, the more I play against him, the Legion's just kind of shit. If you split up, Legion's ability is basically useless. And once you get the first Feral Frenzy hit, you've no ability. So Legion has no anti-loop, no stealth, uh, no mobility. You can use that frenzy for mobility, but the 4 second stun at the end cancels out the 15% movement speed you got for those 10 seconds. So Legion is really shit in my opinion. They did a full rework because if their ability does do damage, then they're broken. If their ability doesn't do damage, then they're shit. Legion needs a full scale rework. I mean, a completely different power similar to Freddy. Next is Plague, who I'm going to put at the bottom of B tier. I think what holds Plague back is just coordination. Like, her early game sucks. You have to spend a ton of time getting each survivor fully infected, which by the time that happens, you can literally lose like 2 or 3 gens. Uh, and even then, once you have everyone fully infected, that's it. Now you're just a regular killer, a super tall killer at that, with no power who has to do that. You get your one corrupt purge. If you get unlucky and you're in like let's say Grim Pantry or some shit, and that spawns way up in the corner in the hill behind one of those logs, you're gonna have to drop everything you're doing, walk all the way to the corner, pop that corrupt purge, and every survivor's just gonna hide out the corrupt purge now, because you're like 50 meters away from the closest survivor. They're all just gonna hide. You're not gonna be able to do anything. But if you get lucky as play, you can get a decent snowball, and if the teams aren't coordinated and someone cleanses at the wrong place or the wrong time, that can severely backfire for them. So for that reason, I'm going to put it at the bottom of the B tier. Jesus Christ, this game has so many killers. Alright, next is Ghostface, who's going to be just above Freddy in the C tier. Um, Ghostface has little snowball. If you get some people 99, and you play your cards right, you actually can get a wee bit of snowball going. You might be able to get like two quick downs. But other than that, he really doesn't have much going for him. His chase is below average. The whole removing your red stain and crouching and stuff doesn't really work that much anymore. He's susceptible once again to holding W, just running forward, running. Well, you can't really run early because he's notorious anymore, but he would get that first hit. But he's basically he used to be a better Wraith, but now Wraith is sort of like Ghostface, but instead of the exposed effect, you have much more mobility, which in my opinion, that mobility that Wraith has is better than Ghostface's ability to insta down. So I think Ghostface could use a few buffs, but I think he's going to be stuck in the mid tier hell for the rest of his life, to be honest, which is unfortunate. Next is Demogorgon, who I'm going to put at the top of the B tier. I think Demogorgon is A tier potential, but is sort of being held back a bit because behavior seem a little bit scared to overbuff Demogorgon. But as for now, Demogorgon has got pretty decent mobility with his portals. If he gets a good portal setup, he can actually. Whoops. If he's got a good portal setup, he can get really good mobility. Those notifications are really starting to piss me off. But yeah, uh, he's got tracking with his portals, and his shred ability is also pretty damn solid. It's sort of like a Hillbilly scenario where you can either shred the loop or you can't. Sort of like you can either curve or you can't. But he can shred a lot more loops than Hillbilly can curve. So overall, Demogorgon is a pretty solid killer, but I think could definitely use a little bit more work. Next is Oni, who's going to go up at the top of A tier. Um, Basically, Oni just sort of depends on, for starters, your add-ons. Uh, Something I'm not really liking these days with Oni is that I basically require duration add-ons. At the minute, with the downing penalty and the fact your ability only lasts 45 seconds, you literally need duration add-ons, or else against decent survivors, you're not getting any more than maybe 1 or 2 downs. You need duration add-ons to consistently get 2 or even 3 downs, which is a little bit annoying in my opinion. But with duration add-ons, you can seriously snowball really well. It sort of just depends on your early game. If you get a good early game, you win. If you get bad early game, you might lose, unless you make a really good comeback. But Oni is and will be always a really strong killer. I think he could use some quality of life buffs. Like I said, duration needs to be fixed, and then maybe his early game sorted out a wee bit. But other than that, Oni, top tier in my opinion, always will be, and I like him. Next is Deathslinger, who, in my opinion, I will stand by this, is slightly better than Huntress on most maps. On most maps, Deathslinger is slightly better than Huntress, and this is why. So, Deathslinger is basically just Huntress, but you sacrifice some of your snowball potential for even more chased lethality. And this is why I think it's more valuable. Against decent survivors, you're not going to snowball because they're not going to be all sitting together. You know, as Oni, you can do that because as long as they're like within 40 meters of each other, you can snowball. But with someone like Huntress, they have to be literally bunched up together. This isn't going to happen against good survivors. But Deathslinger, you know, you can just so quickly down people that sometimes it can be hard for the survivors to keep up in terms of your chase speed to their gen speed. Sometimes you just overtake them just due to how fast your chases can be. And even then, to say Deathslinger has no snowball potential is just wrong. You know, I can just sneak up on someone, monitor and abuse, hit them, shoot them, down them, and then go on to the next person. Especially if someone's injured, you know, you can just get really good snowball. But I think his chase is just so strong. It is so strong. It is, in my opinion, either second or third, only rivaled by Nurse and Spirit. I think Nurse is a better chase, but I think Spirit sometimes is a better chase, sometimes is a worse chase. And to be on that level is just really, really good. So Deathslinger, in my opinion, slightly better than Hunters, but either way, just a really strong killer. Next is Executioner or Pyramid Head, who is slightly weaker than Hunters in my opinion, just because he is more susceptible to holding W. As Executioner, it doesn't matter how, even if you're within his punishment of the damn range, you can still just run and run and run because you can dodge his attack at that range. And there's not much you can do about it. You can run early, and you can keep running, and you can keep running, and you can drop the pallet, and you can keep running, and he can hit you, which is why I think he is a wee bit weaker than Hunters. But at loops, he is stronger than Hunters in my opinion, at least at some. And the cages can also seriously screw over survivors if you get like lucky with them. You know, you can tunnel someone out of the game really fast as Pyramid Head. If you get lucky, you can actually have someone dead, even if they're decent, within about 3 minutes, which is really, really strong. So for that reason, he's going to be in the low end of it here. And next is Blight, who I've come to terms is probably better than Oni. I think at their max potential, Blight is slightly better than Oni, just because Oni's early game really does matter. And if he has a bad early game, he probably will lose. Whereas Blight doesn't have to worry about his early game and can just sort of, from the start is really good. If anything, Blight has one of the best early games in the game. He has the best mobility in the game. You know, you can cross entire maps in seconds as Blight. It's insane. He's also one of the best chases in the game. Borderline uncounterable. Funny that people say Nurse and Spirit and Deathslinger shit have no counterplay, when in my opinion, Blight is also up there in terms of no counterplay. Because if the Blight plays it right, you will get hit every time, especially if it's a good one. Not to mention he's also got decent snowball potential. He can down people quite fast. He can also be where he wants to be. You know, I can down someone, and then I can down someone 100 meters away within 10 seconds. It was pretty crazy. But for all those reasons, Blight will be, in my opinion, the third best killer in the game. Also entering the A tier is Twins. I think Twins are just like a slightly better hag. It's sort of the same case where most teams you will win, but against those super coordinated ones you will really struggle. But I do think it's slightly harder to counter a Twins than a hag. So, they are really strong. They're really good campers. In fact, they basically are hag 2.0. In my opinion, Twins are so similar in terms of playstyle and in terms of strength to hag. Like, Twins is to hag what Deathslinger is to Huntress. Slightly better in my opinion, but very, very similar in terms of playstyle and strength. But I think Twins are just slightly harder to counter than Hag, which makes them a wee bit stronger. Next is Trickster. Trickster recently just got his buff slash nerf. I don't even know what to call it at this point. I think it is a nerf unless you're using the Cut Through You single and Edge of Revival album. With those two add-ons, you can actually injure a survivor in 4 blades, which is really, really good. With that add-on, you're basically Leatherface, but even better. Trickster with those two add-ons is a better camper than Leatherface. I have multiple clips, I have multiple, occasions of me, being able to, with those two add-ons, a full healthy survivor comes running in for the unhook. I can down that healthy survivor as they unhook, as they just mid-animation, I can down them as they unhook. And for some reason, survivors don't have iframes from your blades while they're being unhooked. So as soon as their body actually leaves the hook, they'll start getting hit by blades. So you can actually immediately injure a survivor even before they can start moving again. So even if they have BT, I can down the unhooker, proc BT on the unhooked person, and then the BT person just starts moving, and then I can just finish them off, and I can have both of them down every time, and it's insane. It's insane how strong he is at camping. Plus, your cheese is also pretty good. You know, in the this sort of this what this buff slash nerf did. Trickster is better in the open, like he already was, and he's better at loops where he can't hit you, but he's worse in loops that he can't hit you because of the laceration decay and the reduced knives. In my opinion, I really hated the reduced knives change they did when they put the life and the fire rate nerf. But you know, I think add-on this Trickster is down here in the D tier. But I think Trickster with those two add-ons, which I will count in the B tier just above Plague. And lastly is the Nemesis. I'm going to put him in the middle C tier between Hillbilly and Ghostface. I sort of mentioned how I feel about his strength in my Should You Be Nemesis video. I think he's extremely susceptible to holding W. He has no mobility, no stealth, little map pressure, little snowball potential, and his anti-loop is only good if the survivor is already infected. So I don't think Nemesis is that strong. I think if survivors know how to play against him, which isn't that hard, you will get shit on most of the time. There isn't really much to say about Nemesis, even though he's the new killer. He just isn't that great. But he's not terrible because he can do some stuff if you get lucky. And people, you find a bunch of infected survivors in a row, and they're not in great places, and they don't hold W. You can still down them, and if you get lucky with your zombies, they can provide you with some pressure. But overall, I just don't think he's that great. So that's my killer tier list. If you want to take a look at it here, Nurse's Spirit in the S tier. The A tier we got Blight, Oni, Deathslinger, Huntress, Executioner, Twins, and Hag. B tier, Demogorgon, Doctor, Wraith, Trickster, but only with those two purple add-ons. And Plague, C tier, Hillbilly, or Bubba, Hillbilly, Nemesis, Ghostface, Freddy, and the D tier, the bottom five, Myers, Trapper, Clown, Legion, and Pig. I think D and C tier is on the weaker end of killers. B tier, sort of like a mid tier kind of middle area where you'll do fine against most teams, but although the good teams will shit on you. A tier is where I feel like these are strong killers and you will beat most teams, especially the top of A tier. The top 3, top 4 in the A tier are really goddamn strong. And the S tier is just, the absolute top tier killers. So if you agree, let me know. If you disagree, let me know why. Make sure you watch my reasoning. Thanks for watching.